The top stories of the week with added depth and context from our team of reporters, what we call the Daily Debrief. Hello, everyone. I'm Todd Quinones. Well, viewers like you are asking for more depth, and so here exactly is where you're going to find it. Let's jump right in.
Despite being brought up several times before, a bill to abolish the death penalty has never before made it out of committee. This year, Democrats have pushed it all the way through the full assembly, but there's still a lot of hurdles to jump over before it becomes law.
Abolishing state-sanctioned executions, AB 395 would throw out the death penalty and retroactively commute all sentences to life in prison without parole instead, garnering support from many Democrats and UNLV Associate Professor of African American and African Studies, Tyler Perry.
When you really start to question and challenge the efficacy or even the morality of keeping the death penalty in place.
Perry says the death penalty is expensive. A 2014 Nevada performance audit found it cost more than $500,000 more than other murder convictions. It doesn't deter crime, and he says, in an imperfect judicial system, you can never be sure you haven't killed an innocent person.
It's hard to make the moral case that it should stay, because how many lives are too much? Is 2% too many? Is 10% too many?
Death penalty supporters like Janine Hansen, president of Nevada Families for Freedom, say that the risk of putting an innocent person to death does weigh heavy in the argument for abolishment.
If you put somebody to death that is in fact innocent, there's no way to make that right.
That is true. And that's why we must be very careful in pursuing the death penalty.
But she says it's worth it to ensure that the most heinous criminals never get out of jail to act again. At the end of the day, Hansen says some people just don't deserve to live, citing as one example the 1 October shooter.
Well, we don't want criminals that have committed these heinous murders to be out on our streets.
Hansen says the death penalty is also a tool for DAs to get pleas for life in prison without parole, ensuring the person never gets out. Without it, she fears the worst criminals could plead to life with parole, opening the door to freedom one day.
Now, this bill currently sits in the Senate. If it passes there in its current form, it will go to Governor Steve Sisolak for a signature. He has said publicly he's not sure if he's going to sign it, saying in certain severe cases, the death penalty could be considered. Sean DELANCEY, 13 Action News.
Sean, thank you for joining us. And how did you first hear about this topic up in Carson City?
I've been following the legislature since square one, actually since before the session actually began, this one that happens every 2 years. And they have this bill tracker called Nellis on the legislature's website to provide for transparency. You can see every single bill and what they go through. So I've been tracking this death penalty bill since the beginning of the session, and things got very interesting when the Assembly, Democrats in the Assembly, passed the bill out of the full Assembly on party lines, 26-16. And that's really significant because a bill like this has been proposed multiple times in the past, but it's never gotten out of committee to a full floor for a vote. So this might be the first time that this actually has a chance of becoming law. And that's when I decided it was time to jump on it and get the story done.
And who did you speak to during the week and also, of course, this morning?
Yeah, a couple of people. It all starts with going through and watching the discussions from the committee hearings that they have on all of these bills to see how it's developing, some of the arguments for and against it, to make sure that we've got the facts down. And then we end up talking with people who could be affected by this. So you can see handwritten, this is the transcription of my interviews here. The first person that I talked with was Janine Hansen with Nevada Families for Freedom. She is against banning the death penalty here in Nevada, saying essentially that there are some severe cases in the state where the death penalty should be used, that we don't want very heinous criminals running through the streets and chances of them getting back out. The other person that I spoke with here is Tyler Perry. He's an associate professor over at UNLV of African and African Diaspora Studies. And he essentially argued that in an imperfect justice system, one that often is skewed against minority populations, there's no way to have an error rate when it comes to the death penalty, because you could be killing an innocent person, and in an imperfect system, that can't be allowed.
And did you find more support or more pushback? I know you mentioned your interviews, kind of overall feel. Are you kind of getting a more for or against?
Well, we always try and find balance when actually presenting the story, but in researching it, they have exhibits on Nellis where people from the public just get to submit their thoughts on the bill, and it's attached to the bill page. And there was a lot more support for the bill and repealing the death penalty than there was arguments against it. But there was a lot of on both sides, so this has definitely been a really heated issue.
And where are we at now? I guess when should we know a decision? What would be kind of the next steps?
Well, this is where it really gets interesting because, again, it's never made it this far in the legislative session before, but it's got a couple of hurdles to go through. We don't know exactly when we should be hearing something. The first thing that we need to know is that the legislative session ends at the end of this month. So if they don't get it passed, that will be the deadline. It dies at that point. The Senate is where it is sitting right now. It hasn't had a hearing just yet. If the Senate does end up passing it, which it could potentially happen, then it would go to Governor Sisolak's desk. And the interesting thing there is that Governor Sisolak has said publicly that he's not sure if he'll actually sign this bill, saying that in certain severe cases, there are situations where it could warrant the death penalty. So even if a Democrat legislature passes it to a Democrat governor, it could still fail in the end. And that's something that we don't know at this point.
All right. Well, thank you again, Sean, for joining us. And for more on today's big story, visit ktnv.com.
And we'll be back with more now of the Daily Debrief after the break. And welcome back to the Daily Debrief, an in-depth look at the top stories of the week. Well, for more details on any of the stories that we are talking about, just head to ktnv.com.
I'm Jordan Gartner, and in today's big story, we are talking weather with Justin Bruce. Justin, we are hearing that there will be a new climate normal when it comes to comparing our local temperatures. Is this true?
It is true. Kind of some statistical bookkeeping, but you will often hear us when we talk about the weather on Channel 13 say it's like today, 12 degrees above the average. Well, that average temperature references the last 3 decades of observations. So our average has been based on the weather observations from 1981 to 2010. Well, now that it's 2021, we're going to shift the averages. Took a few months of quality checking, but now our new average is based on 1991 to 2020. And the fact that we are now including the last decade of weather observations in the normal, or the quote unquote average, means that the averages have gone up, Jordan, because it's been hot as of late.
How did you come across such a report, and who in fact updated these new normals?
Yeah, thankfully it wasn't me in an Excel spreadsheet. It's the National Weather Service, specifically the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is the parent organization of the National Weather Service. And this all falls under the Department of Commerce umbrella, so the federal government in charge of keeping these averages. And we do this in cooperation and coordination with the World Meteorological Organization, which just exists to try to keep all of the different countries kind of on the same scientific page. Since the weather happens all over the globe, we kind of need to cooperate when it comes to observations and keeping weather records and that sort of thing. But this is something that we knew was going to happen. We also knew it was going to take a few months for the new averages to be computed. But yeah, earlier this week, they unveiled the new normals, not only for Las Vegas, but for climate sites all around the world.
What does this mean moving forward? When it comes to viewers, when it comes to us living here in Southern Nevada, are we going to have a warmer future, or what kind of would this be now?
Well, it is an interesting sort of launching pad to talk about our climate, which of course is just the weather averaged over a long period of time. And this, of course, leads into the discussion about climate change. The climate scientist consensus is overwhelming, greater than 95%, that humans are indeed responsible for much of the climate change we've observed since the mid-1900s. And just a few stats for you. Globally, the temperature has risen more than 2 degrees Fahrenheit since the late 1800s when weather records kind of began. And we have other ways of measuring the temperature, not just thermometers from the late 1800s. So reliable data. Of course, ice is shrinking every year. There seems to be less and less of it. Temperatures are warming, and even just kind of going on our own experience, Jordan. 5 of Las Vegas's warmest years on record have happened in the last 10 years. 7 of the global average warmest years on record have happened in the last decade. So I always say that the proof climate change is kind of in the pudding. We also, of course, know about carbon dioxide, and it has never measured as high as it is now, currently 416 parts per million, which is just way higher than it's been. And a lot of that has to do with pollution and our impacting the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution.
And we are one of the driest, largest cities, is what I was reading. Are we by far number one, or is there hope for someone to catch up to us?
Well, we are in rare air. Las Vegas averages about 4 inches of rain per year. Phoenix, which you think, okay, well, what about them? They're a big city in the desert. They are obviously farther south than we are. They tap into the monsoon between June, July, August, and September, the seasonal fluctuation of moisture, meaning they get more pop-up summer thunderstorms down toward Phoenix. So they actually average about 8 inches of rain per year. Again, we're closer to 4 inches per year. Yuma is a very dry city, but they just don't have the 2 million plus population that we do here in the Valley. So yeah, I don't think anyone's going to take away, unfortunately, that record that we live up to of being the driest big city in the country. Now, I will say that even though the climate normal or the average now kind of more accurately reflects our experience of the last couple of decades, there is variability in the season to season weather, the month to month weather. We've been in something called a La Nina pattern. I don't know if you've ever heard of the El Nino Southern Oscillation, but that's something that you'll often hear meteorologists and climatologists talk about. We have been in a La Nina pattern, which means the water in the equatorial Pacific has been a little cooler than average. We are headed toward a neutral El Nino Southern Oscillation Index, which means not really El Nino, not really La Nina, but Jordan, what that means for us is usually pretty warm summer temperatures. When we're in that neutral El Nino pattern, that's when we typically register some of our hottest summer weather. So it could be another scorcher here as we move into the hottest time of year, June, July, August, and September.
All right, well, great. Justin, thank you so much for joining us today. One of my last questions, we're going to talk about the summer temperatures. Of course, sounds like we're going to be a warming trend, and of course, maybe a hot summer again. So thank you so much again for joining us.
And we'll be back with more now of the Daily Debrief after the break. And welcome back to the Daily Debrief, an in-depth look at the top stories of the week. Well, for more details on any of the stories that we are talking about, just head to ktnv.com.
When you're driving around Las Vegas, smog check signs like this one behind me pop up on what seem like every corner. Las Vegas ranks in the top 15 cities most polluted by ozone and in the top 25 in short-term particle pollution. This can all greatly impact your health.
See worsened asthma attacks, chest tightness, difficulty breathing, coughing, and it could increase your susceptibility to respiratory infections. And with particle pollution in particular, it has been linked to cause lung cancer and premature death.
Nevada continues to experience some of the most significant air quality challenges across the country. A big problem, we lack substantial rain to help clear pollution.
Unfortunately, here in Las Vegas, our annual rainfall is 4.19 inches of rain. So we can't really rely on that. We sort of have more impacts negatively.
Winds can kick up dust, lightning can start wildfires, and
high pressure that really cooks ozone and pollutants in here and prevents it from leaving the valley.
There are ways we can do our part to improve our air.
The best thing that you can do is just prevent poor air quality. And how you can do that is preventing wildfires, So if it is a windy day, try not to recreate with sparks. So no campfires, no fireworks.
What we drive and how much we drive affects our air quality.
There's a lot that can be done to improve air quality, especially in Nevada. In Nevada, the most significant contributor to air pollution is our transportation sector. So it's critical that we start transitioning away from fossil fuel sources.
There are more than 3 million people in Nevada. That's more than 3 million people at risk. The Las Vegas Urban League's Women, Infants, and Children program educates families on how they can protect themselves.
So I always tell my parents, change your filters as you would pay your rent. So every 30 days. Check the air quality on a daily basis is very, very good information, and it'll allow you and your kids to stay safe.
Air Quality Awareness Week is May 3rd through the 7th. Each day will focus on different topics related to air quality. For more information, you can visit our website, ktmd.com. Reporting, I'm BREE, 13 Action News.
And we'll be back with more now of the Daily Debrief after the break. And welcome back to the Daily Debrief, an in-depth look at the top stories of the week. Well, for more details on any of the stories that we are talking about, just head to ktnv.com.
It is National Air Quality Awareness Week. Bree, tell me a little bit more about this week and why it's so important.
Yes, so the American Lung Association released their 2021 air quality report, and Nevada didn't do so well. Clark County in particular got an F, just because air pollution is very big here. We're in the top 15 cities most polluted by ozone, and that can just have significant health impacts. And also because I'm a meteorologist, weather patterns can also kind of contribute to how much pollution is here in Nevada, and especially here around southern Nevada in the valley.
What is like one of the main causes to our air quality problem here? You know, a lot of people think it's just the weather. Some people think it's just the cars. And is it anything about the proximity to other cities that gives us this problem?
Yeah, so the number one contributor to air pollution still in Nevada is our transportation. And so that is why I talked to the American Lung Association, and they are encouraging, to kind of make that transition from fossil fuels to reduce that output of air pollution. Also with our weather, we have very dry air, and we don't see a lot of rain. And so rain would kind of help pull those air particles, that air pollution particle down. And so it wouldn't necessarily be as dispersed across the region. But since we don't have that, it kind of just sits there. And then we have high pressure that kind of just like keeps it right over the city. It doesn't allow it to leave the valley. And so those are all contributing factors. High winds, and then we're also getting like wildfires, which contribute to smoke, and we're also like lightning strikes during monsoon season that can cause wildfires or brush fires, anything like that. And that's why we have very dry air, and that's why we encourage no outdoor burning on those days. Also, though, the weather moves from west to east. That's how all of our weather works for the most part. And so we do get some of those air pollution particles, the smoke coming in from cities that are like California had their most active wildfire season yet in 2020. And so that contributes to it too, as we are seeing that smoke since we are so close to those cities and to those states like Washington, like those can all travel to Nevada and Las Vegas because of the way our weather works. And especially when those winds start to pick up, we have the jet stream. If those are all working together, then that's not necessarily going to be a great combination for pollution here in the valley. And so there's so many things that contribute to it, but there's a lot that we can do.
What is is there like a simple, easy step that each individual person can take every day that the American Lung Association that told you to like start here? It may be a big problem, but there's one thing that we can do.
So a big thing that I found really interesting when talking to my friend at the National Weather Service, and what I encourage people to do too, is that I feel like since wildfires, when we're heading into wildfire season, don't recreate with anything that could burn. Like no outdoor burning is recommended, and that can significantly impact air quality. And if we just follow those simple guidelines, then that can help tremendously. Also, with transportation being the #1 cause for air pollution in Nevada, just thinking of different ways, alternative ways of traveling, walking or biking can really help, and it's not going to take too much effort. It's very easy that you can do. And so those are just some ways that you can kind of help reduce your air quality imprint.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bree, for giving us a little deeper look at this story with you today.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much. I love doing it, and I'm just so happy that I got to talk to so many people because it's a very important issue, especially here in Nevada. We had an F grade in Clark County. I would like to see that grade rise.
Thanks for watching the Daily Debrief on your streaming device. If you miss any part of this week's program, just hit the back button on your remote, then scroll down until you see the KTNV digital exclusives. Well, there you're going to find this show and also all of our dedicated streaming content. Stay tuned for more from 13 Action News after the break, and check us out anytime right here on KTNV Streaming, Las Vegas News on your time.